This is going to be a quick introduction to chemistry. 11:31, you are almost done. We have this pace and then one more after this. And actually this pace, there's not a lot of math. There's not a lot to do other than reading and trying to keep some terminology straight. And there are a lot of big words that we're going to be exposed to. At the end of the pace, you're going to learn about some types of, we'll call them chemicals, all right, that actually produce the smells that we think of when we think of certain medicines or foods. When you think of like fingernail polish remover that has a very strong odor, right? You're going to be learning what that is, what causes that. Even ripening bananas have a very distinctive odor. Excuse me. And just a lot of things that have odors are actually caused by, and flavors. Artificial vanilla that's used in cooking and baking, all right, is really manufactured in labs by making these certain chemicals. And even in nature, it's the same chemicals just produced in nature. So it's the same arrangement of atoms to make up molecules, and we're going to see a lot of creativity, a lot of variety in this section here. And yet at the root of it, we might call it the spine, okay? The backbone of all that we're going to study in this pace is carbon. Carbon is the root that makes up all living things, but it's also at the center of a whole branch of science called organic chemistry. And as you're going to see, and really even though this pace seems long and seems complicated, there are entire courses and fields of science just based on the type of content that's just introduced in this pace. Now, you do not have to be a master chemist to get through this pace. As I've said in some other paces, there's a lot of content that they are going to present in this pace that you're not going to understand, and you're going to feel like you are being overwhelmed. It feels like every other word you're reading is a brand new word, okay? I understand that, even reading through it myself. The chemistry course that I usually teach does not do much of anything with this branch of organic chemistry. But you know, having gone through the physical science paces with students, I know that you've been introduced to some of the basic concepts here. And really, this just goes back and reviews through that again. So if you had it in physical science, you're going to recognize some of these terms, and then they're going to build on it a little bit more, talk about how some of these things are formed, both in nature, chemical processes, and in industry, how they make them, and then how they're used in industry. There's going to be a fair amount you're going to have to memorize. So I'm just going to tell you right up front, this pace is not a pace that you need to fret that you don't understand, therefore you're going to fail and you're never going to be able to pass chemistry. I looked ahead at the pace test. It's a lot of matching. It's a lot of multiple choice. There's some that is fill in the blank, but it's all coming from the self-test and the checkup. So you'll have a good feel for what you need to memorize. And then by this point, you are in probably 11th, 12th grade. You know how you learn, you know how you think, you know what you need to do to study. So maybe it's note cards, maybe it's drawing diagrams, highlighting things, whatever works for you. I think you need to do that, all right, and challenge yourself to really find ways to memorize. Basically, you're just memorizing a lot of stuff. I am going to, on the Pace Success website page for this pace, I'm going to try to look up a few other videos that I think might be helpful and kind of complement what you're learning in this pace that maybe other teachers have put together to explain things and even perhaps visualize some of this in a different way. So, and I'm going to ask you too, if you come across a good video, would you send it my way and I'll add it to the website that will help other students. But let me just give you a quick overview. This was kind of from physical science, but it's going to really help you as you go through this. If we have just a spine of, let's say, 1 carbon, here on page 10, it tells us that that has the prefix meth. That would be methane. 1 carbon, you could have a hydrogen coming off all 4 sides, and that would be methane. Then there's ethane, that's 2 carbons. If there's 3 carbons, we call it propane. 4 carbons is butane. So here I've got 4 carbons all linked together. And I could add a hydrogen here, a hydrogen here, a hydrogen here, put another hydrogen here, 1 up here, 1 here, 1 down here, 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 and here. Okay? And hydrogen's like the most common element to be added on, and that would be butane. Now, sometimes carbon can form a double bond. When that happens, we still have a hydrogen here and a hydrogen here, but the hydrogen that would have been hanging off here and the one that would have been here actually become part of this double bond. And so we have a hydrogen above, and then over here we have hydrogen, 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 hydrogen. But we have a double bond here in position 1 between the first 2 carbons. So we call that 2-butene. Now, I meant to bring an illustration of this, but picture this as being put together with Lego blocks, okay? Some kind of tinker toy. And if you flipped it around so that you had, carbon, 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 and then the double bond here and the carbon, you might be tempted to say, oh, that would be 3-butane. Butene. Because it's between the third, it's in the 3rd position. But interestingly, you can flip this. I mean, this is a link. It's like a toy. You can move it around. And so it is actually exactly the same as this. So we would still call it, I called it 2. I should not have done that. It's actually in the 1st position. 2 would be here in the middle, okay? It's in the 1st position between the 2 carbons. And over here, it's in the 1st position between 2 carbons coming in from this end. Now the PACE goes into a more elaborate formulaic way of determining that, but just picture this as being able to flip it, okay? And you can move it around, and so you want to find the smallest number that represents its position. Now, do you notice here that I called this butane? This is butene. Okay, and then if there's a triple bond, we call that butyne. Now this would be 2-butyne because it is in the 2nd position in from either end, okay? So single bonds, butane. If there is 1 double bond, then it's called E, the 2nd vowel, right? A-E-I-O-U-Y. So A first, then E, alphabetically, Y comes last, and that would be the triple bond. So if I had, let's say 6, let's see what 6 is. 6 is hex, okay? So if I had 6 carbons all linked up and there was a triple bond in there, then it would be hexine, okay? If there was a double bond, then it would be hexene. If they're all single, hexane. So we're looking at several different parts here. How many carbons? That tells you the first prefix, the meth or bute or hex, etc. And those you probably do need to work on memorizing. Some of them might be familiar to you, but you probably ought to know those. And then obviously the ane, ene, ine is important. I want to point out just 2 more things before I let you go. One is that they can replace sometimes one of these H's with, let's say, Br for bromine or I for iodine, okay? Now, do you remember what all of those? There's fluorine, bromine, iodine, chlorine. There's a couple others in that column. All of those are called halogens, and maybe you remember that from a previous PACE. So all of a sudden, they introduce a word, a halide. So you'll see that in the PACE as you're going through. And that just means they, instead of having all hydrogens, they've replaced a hydrogen with one of the halogens. See, isn't it crazy how they all sound similar? Hydrogen, halogen. Halogens are from this family on the periodic table. All right, then they talk about, and I'm not going to go into great detail here, but it can get a little more complex. Sometimes one of these can be something else, like OH. Or maybe they replace one of these with actually a group that is a C with 3 hydrogens around it, and that takes the place of one of the hydrogens. So all kinds of variation, as I said, and I'm not going to try to go through them all. I can't remember them all right now off the top of my head. I just got through reading through and studying this pace. But kind of keep that in mind as you're reading. And I just noticed here on page 11 when I was reading here, these look like double H's, and that was kind of confusing to me. And then I realized, wait. The first H here and the last H here are actually attached to the C's above them. And then these other H's have nothing to do with those H's. That's part of the C with 3 H's around it. I think they should have kept those lines a little shorter, kind of grouped them closer to that carbon underneath. Then they have formulas for determining how many hydrogens you have based on how many carbons. It's a very easy pre-algebra type algebra 1 formulas, and I don't think you should find that to be too hard. Okay. As you're reading, make sure you're studying or looking at your workbook to see what answers you need to fill in, and you should be able to find all the answers, I think, fairly easily. Don't fret about it. Look ahead to the checkup, see what you need to know, do a study guide for it, study it, memorize what you need to know for the checkup, okay? And then move on. But like I said, thankfully you're going to be happy to know there's not a lot of problem solving, balancing equations, complicated chemistry kind of things. It's more introducing you to a field of chemistry that if some of you go on in science and chemistry, you'll learn more about in college. But if not, at least you've been exposed to it, even if you don't become a master of it. But do your best and use this as a tool to strengthen your brain and prepare you for the rigors of memorizing stuff for college, all right? And I'll end with it again. If you have some other suggested videos that you think would help other students as they work through this pace, please let me know. Thanks.